Hi, this is Lainey Reno, and you are listening to the Visionary Family Ministries podcast. You are about to listen to part 1 of Visionary Fatherhood with my dad, Dr. Rob Reno. We hope this message is an encouragement to you and that you share it with your friends. You can learn more about our ministry at visionaryfam.com.
So this morning, title, Visionary Fatherhood for these 90 minutes. Now, visionary is a central word for us in our ministry. In fact, that's what Amy's and my ministry is called, Visionary Family Ministries. And the conferences that we do in churches around the country, around the world, visionary parenting, visionary marriage. So this is a word that fits for us. Now, this word visionary, it's not complicated. It means that you've got a vision for the future. You've got a plan for what's ahead. You can see a desired outcome, and so you're doing things today to say, hey, in 5 years, 10 years, in eternity, we'll spend a fair amount of our focus there today, that this is a dream and a desire I have, so I'm going to do some things today to pursue that vision, to pursue that dream. And then fatherhood. What's the purpose of a father? Why would God entrust immortal souls to our care? There's lots of things that go with being a dad, providing for our kids, protecting our kids, all of that kind of stuff. But this morning, I want us to focus on what I believe is the most important aspect or the most important part of the mission of being a dad, and that's this: to build a love relationship with our children in order to help them build a love relationship with God. If you ask me to summarize what's the mission of fatherhood, that'd be my best effort. To build a love relationship with our children in order to help them build a love relationship with God. There's other ways to say it, maybe more simply. The mission of fatherhood: connect with our kids to help them connect with God. Pursue a relationship with our kids to help them pursue a relationship with God. So what I'm going to do this morning is I'm going to talk about the two parts of this. One, how we can better connect with our children. How we can better build heart-connected relationships with them. And then the second part then, how we can help them connect with God, how we can help them follow Jesus. And I want to start off with a couple of scriptures where we see these two fatherhood missions come together. The first one is Proverbs 23. A lot of the book of Proverbs is written by Solomon. And in this particular chapter, Solomon is writing to his son. And one of the things that we sometimes miss about Proverbs is we oftentimes think of Proverbs as God's words of wisdom to us. Now, that would be absolutely right. Okay, these are God's words through the human authors. They are actually God's words of wisdom to us. But they're also a historical record. When Solomon's writing to his son, this is a real dad writing to a real son. So he's sitting down and he's it's not pen and paper or who knows what he's writing with, the parchment or whatever. And it's a real dad, just as real as you, taking time to write wisdom for his son and giving him something physical that says, son, I want you to have this. So look at the way Solomon writes to his son. So don't think of this as Bible-y, in other words, that this is long ago and people we don't know. But this is a real dad writing to a real son. He says this: let not your heart envy sinners, but continue in the fear of the Lord all the day. Hear, my son, and be wise. Direct your heart in the way. That's the way of following God. And then this verse is a huge one in our family. My son, give me your heart, and let your eyes observe my ways. Solomon's got two purposes here. His primary purpose is to help his son follow God and not follow the world. All right, that's his primary purpose. And in order to help his son build a relationship with God, Solomon's building a relationship with him. Look at the beginning of verse 26. My son, give me your heart. That's a dad going to his son. Son, give me your heart. Let me into your life. And this is a predictable spiritual attack. You can count on it. Set your clock, 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade. You're going to get spiritual attack against the heart connection between you and your kids. And when I talk about heart connection, what I mean there is the warmth, the closeness, the openness, the honesty, and the trust. I've got 2 kids graduated here from Wheaton Academy. We've homeschooled. They've got a homeschool partnership program. We have kids here full-time sometimes. Our JD is a senior, and I've got 2 kids here right now. How many of you guys have junior high or high school students? Okay, lots of you. You pick up your junior high or high school student from a church, from youth group, from Christian school, some special event, and you say, how was school today? What do they say? Oh, you had some special chapel event today. What'd you learn? Nothing. Yeah, nothing, stuff. What was it good? Whatever. And you kind of get these one-word sorts of answers, and you can sense the son, the daughter bristling a little bit under the intense interrogation, right? I mean, after all, those are some pretty horrible questions you're asking. I mean, how was chapel? What did you learn, right? I mean, you're a monster of a father for even asking that stuff. What you're doing when you're asking those basic questions is you're trying to build a little bit of heart connection. You're saying, not Solomon's way, you're saying, my son, give me your heart. You let me in. What was meaningful to you about your day or about that event at church or whatever it was, that church event, that school event. And immediately you can start to see the spiritual attack on the son or daughter not wanting to give their heart to you, not wanting to open up to you, one-word answers. And the spiritual attack also comes against the parent, where we start to get discouraged at the lack of heart connection, the lack of relationship during those teen years. So a lot of us as dads, Dennis Rainey talks a lot about this, a lot of us as dads withdraw and we pull out from pressing in like Solomon's doing, my son, give me your heart, pursuing the heart of the teenager. And so during those teen years, when they need us most, our relationship is actually at its most distant, at its most functional. And a very high percentage of our conversations are about functional life, school, chores, sports. And if there has to be a heart-to-heart conversation, it's because they did something wrong. That's something that I've caught myself with, and as we counsel parents of teenagers, we see a lot. Asking yourself, what percentage of meaningful conversations with my teenager are negative? And when I say meaningful, I don't mean, please pick this up at the store and please pick up your room or whatever. I'm talking about meaningful conversations. And sometimes, if we're honest, a very high percentage are negative because we're having to confront this or confront that. Now, in this next verse, look at this. My son, give me your heart. And then Solomon says to his son, let your eyes observe my ways. So part of the way Solomon's going to connect with his son, part of the way Solomon's going to train his son is to say, look at my life. Look at the way I've done it. Now, in the next few verses, what Solomon's going to do is he's going to warn his son about sexual sin. Solomon's going to warn his son about sexual sin. He's going to say to his son, son, look how holy and righteous I have been in this area of sexuality, and I want you to do it just like me. Thank you. Right. If you know your history, wait a second, that doesn't sound quite right. Okay, Solomon is not the one we're going to hold up as the paragon of virtue when it comes to sexuality. So here's what he's saying. He said, when he says, let your son observe, my son, let your eyes observe my ways, he's saying, don't do it like your dad. Do not follow my example in this area, because I know what I'm talking about when I'm warning you about these things. Pain and suffering are ahead. And this principle from Solomon here, I think, is such a vital ingredient in having a real discipleship relationship with our kids. That as they get older, junior high and high school, we become more and more vulnerable about the areas of brokenness, struggle, and failure in our lives. Now, obviously, we need to ask the Lord's wisdom with when we tell our kids about some of the darker chapters. So with my 22-year-old son and 17-year-old son, all right, I have laid out in detail, my porn addiction from the age of 13 through the middle of college, right? How it started, how it continued, the lies, the secrecy, the spiritual damage it caused in my life, and being able to look them in the eye and say, I don't want this for you. Do not do it like your dad. You know, some fathers will tell me, well, I don't want to share that stuff, with my kids, whether it might be just bad choices with sexuality or drugs or alcohol or whatever it was, because I don't want to come across that, it must be okay then. Well, Dad, if you did it, then it must be okay. Now, I think a lot of it just depends on how we approach it. So let's say it's drugs and alcohol. You go to your kid and you say, hey, back when I was your age, I did some stupid stuff. I was drinking and crazy times, man. It was bad. It was bad stuff. Crazy times. You shouldn't do that. Now, if that's the way you do it, I think that actually might be a little alluring for them, if that's the way you present it. But if you're coming to them with an honest heart, with a humble heart, with a repentant heart, they understand that. Sometimes children will say this to parents. And I even had one of my boys say this to me when I was going through my confession time with them about all this sexual stuff. They said, well, Dad, you turned out okay. And I said, no, I didn't. No, I didn't. I mean, God's put the broken pieces back together. Yes, he can do that. But there's a lot of suffering. There was a lot of pain. There was a lot of brokenness in my relationship with God and my relationship with people. I want my kids to know, and I'd like you to callously plagiarize this if you like this, okay? I want my kids to know that as I look back on my life, every single time as I look back on my life, I see disobedience to God's word, I regret it. And every single time, by God's grace, I was faithful and obedient. I'm so thankful. Without exception. And if you agree with that, tell your kids that. Look them in the eye and say, listen, every time I strayed from what God told me to do, I now regret it. And every time, by God's grace, he helped me, I'm thankful, without exception. Let me show you another scripture on this. This is Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 4. Really one of the keynote passages in the New Testament for fathers. It says, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. So here's this morning's conversation in one verse. Fathers, don't provoke your children to anger. This is all about your relationship with them. Don't embitter them toward you. Don't arouse anger in their hearts toward you. Don't drive them away from you with your harshness, with your anger, with your disconnection. And what's the problem with that? What's the problem with like a hard-hearted, conflictual, angry relationship with our kids? Because it keeps us from our primary mission. What's our primary mission? Bringing them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. My daughter, Lissy, she's 20, graduate here of Wheaton Academy. She spent this last year doing a book project. It's called The Heart of Your Teen. And she's writing about the parent-teen relationship from the teen's perspective, okay? And one of the things that she did, she interviewed about 40 teenagers from very diverse families around the United States and around the world. And I want to show you one of the testimonies that she's got in this book, because it fits exactly with Ephesians 6:4. This person said, this is a high school student, I got super annoyed when my dad tried to disciple me spiritually because it didn't feel like there was love in our relationship. Whenever he told me about biblical things, it just made me mad. And I'd tell him that I didn't want to hear it. The weird part was that reading them, now this would be like reading the scriptures or the devotional, on my own, they were actually meaningful to me. The state of my relationship with my dad made it really hard for me to accept anything he had to say, even if it was actually helpful. I mean, this is a teenager just encapsulating perfectly the Ephesians 6:4 principle. The father, through anger, through disconnection, had exasperated her, had aroused anger and bitterness in her heart. So then when dad is trying to bring her up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord, she's not going to have anything to do with it. So the mission of the dad, connect with our kids to help them connect with God. Build a relationship with our kids to help them build a relationship with God. Pursue them to help them pursue God.
This podcast has been brought to you free of charge because of the generous support of listeners like you from around the world. If you believe more families need to hear this message, please consider making a donation. All donations are tax deductible and can be made easily and securely at visionaryfam.com/donate. For additional resources that go along with this message, including the Visionary Parenting book and 8-part Visionary Parenting video series, or for information about hosting a family conference in your community, visit us online at visionaryfam.com.